What is going on, everybody? Welcome back, or not welcome back. Welcome to the first video of this channel, the 501st Show. I'm Braden. I have Armand right below me here. This channel is going to be completely dedicated to talking about Star Wars because we're just complete nerds. And today we're going to be going over a tier list of every single show, every single movie that Star Wars has had to offer over the years, and we're going to be putting them into a tier list. It doesn't get much better than that. Now, I've been watching Star Wars for a long time now. I've seen basically every minute of every one of these shows. Huge Lego Star Wars collector as well. Maybe that can be a video on its own in the future. But yeah, I would like to think that Armand and I know what we're talking about. But Armand, you want to give an introduction of yourself as well?
Yeah, I think we definitely, like Braden said, we're definitely nerds. You guys can see behind me that my bedroom is Star Wars themed. We're the kind of guys that, we have our own lightsabers and we take photos with them at night and we do stuff like that. My Lego collection is the same size as Braden's, if not bigger, over the years. I've got all sorts of stuff. I've seen every piece of Star Wars content except for a couple recent ones that came out, just because I haven't caught up to date. But yeah, I mean, I like to think that we're as close to experts as you can get without like going to school for it, you know?
Absolutely,
I
absolutely.
think we're at that point.
And if there was a Star Wars class at school, I'd be in it. So.
Oh, yeah, exactly.
Right? Okay. All right. So let's get straight into this video. We're going to be taking a look at every movie, every show. We're not really going in any specific order. It's just the order that is presented to us on screen right here. So starting off with A New Hope. Now, you know what? We should do this for every one that we've watched. Let's say like when we've most recently watched it. Now, I'll make it clear that I've watched the original trilogy very recently. I would say within the last month, because I watched the entire thing while building one of my Legos. So I've seen it within the last month.
Right.
Yeah.
Oh man, it's been a while for me. I'm not gonna lie. I might be. It's probably been like a year or so since I've seen the original trilogy.
Okay. All right. So.
The prequels I've seen in the last 6 months.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Those have to be rewatched every year. Okay. Now we got to compromise here because obviously it's not going to be one of us choosing each one. So what are you looking at for A New Hope? For me, I'm going to say an A. And the reason for it is that I think that this is probably one of the most monumental movies in cinema history. I think just in terms of the advancement and the jump that was made by Lucasfilm. And I still think that it's a great story. I understand it's a lot slower, and yes, it's not super great quality when you compare to the Star Wars content you have today, but you have to think about what movies were like when it came out in the 70s and what it has done for movies in general from that point on. And again, it's one of the more creative things that we've seen from the time period as well. So I would give it an A.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with that. I'm bouncing between an A and honestly, it's early, in the video, but low key, I'm going between A and S class because you're right, it is monumental in what it did. I mean, this movie came out 1977, I believe, or something like that. My parents still talk about seeing it in the cinema when it came out. You think about what George Lucas did in that time with this movie. Yeah, when you look at it just as a movie, it might not be the best, like, in that sense. But this, I'd be willing to say that this has more cultural significance than, like, the Rocky films. Like, genuinely.
Whoa.
It's affected people that much. Like,
Yeah.
Rocky is one of those where it's like, holy cow, this is a big franchise. This is huge. Star Wars has the same wow factor when you talk about it, and it all started with A New Hope. And yeah, the storyline is simple. I know that we've had conversations about that, where it's a very basic story, and then George Lucas, he basically took King Arthur and the Sword and the Stone, and then he gave everybody lightsabers and spaceships instead of, horses and swords. And so he changed it up, he made it futuristic. But the props and everything, like, I'm very comfortable saying A.
Okay.
For sure.
I like that as well. So we will put A New Hope in the A tier. I'm glad that we could agree on that. Let's hope
Yeah, no,
that
that's solid.
let's hope that it goes like that the rest of the video, so it's easy for us to decide. Also, what we can
We'll
do,
see.
we didn't discuss this beforehand, but what we can do is like we can order these within the tiers as well. I think that that would make it a lot more interesting as well.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I
Okay.
agree. I
Okay.
agree.
Moving on to what many people would say is their favorite movie of all time, not just in Star Wars, but one of the greatest
Yeah.
movies in general. So I'll let you start. We'll alternate. I'll let you start. Your thoughts. Where do you want Empire Strikes Back?
Okay. Empire Strikes Back, like you said, huge film. A lot of people love it. For me, this is hard. Okay, I'm going between A and B.
Wow, really?
Yeah.
Okay.
I'm going between A and B.
Okay.
And the reason I say that is because like it's if it's a B, it's a super high B.
Okay.
I might have to put it at like a low A
Okay.
because it means a lot and the storyline is great. Especially like this one's got Cloud City and stuff, right? Like
Mhm.
looking the right. Yeah. Okay. So this one is really cool. We get to see like Boba Fett introduced. We've got an entire new planet. Like there's a lot of stuff that they throw into the storyline that's really really interesting. And then the story as a whole, I feel is better than the first one. But at the same time, I don't know if it's got like that S factor. Like even for the first one, the only reason I was even debating S is because of the cultural significance, not really the movie itself.
Okay.
I
Okay.
feel like I don't know if this one has the storyline to
Okay.
get to an S.
So, okay, so here's the thing for me, right? This, in my mind, was
Yeah.
undoubtedly an S tier movie. Like, without a
Really?
doubt in my mind. And I think, like,
Okay.
okay, obviously the biggest twist in movie history when Darth Vader is revealed to be Luke Skywalker's father. Like, I think that
That's
is
true.
huge.
I didn't think about that.
That is huge,
It's
right?
like the most iconic line
It is.
from the franchise.
It is. And then you also have the introduction of Yoda, right, into the Star Wars world. I think Hoth was really well done, and I think
It's true.
and I think
Dagobah's on here.
just in general, right? I think it's probably one of the better sequels as well. I mean, I know I'm not super educated in terms of movies, but I do understand the impact that this movie did have, and it was a tremendous
That is true.
follow-up to what was already a historic movie that came out before it. And that's why for me it's an S. Like, I think you could even argue that this
Yeah.
is the best Star Wars movie that has ever been released. That might be a stretch for some people, but I think it can be debated. So for me it's an S.
So I agree with S tier. I do because I forgot about all the Dagobah stuff, and then also with Hoth. I feel like Hoth was really cool. Like it mattered a lot. But what you said about Vader's line is a really good point. This movie has the most memorable parts of the Star Wars franchise.
Absolutely.
When you ask someone what they remember about Star Wars, I feel like a lot of people, like everybody knows that line. And when you think about Star Wars too, someone who's never seen the movies, never seen the TV shows, they still know who Yoda is, and they know
Absolutely.
who Darth Vader is.
Absolutely.
And so yeah, I agree. I think this is an S tier movie.
Okay.
That's true.
All right. I persuaded you all the way from what was potentially a
persuaded.
B all the way up to an S. So I'm
Well, I forgot about a bunch of stuff in there. I was like, oh yeah, you're right. I gotta watch these again.
Okay. Obviously, if you guys couldn't tell, we weren't born in the 70s. You know, just in case
Yeah.
y'all didn't know. But okay, we're prequels babies. Okay. Now we're
Yeah.
moving on to Return of the Jedi. Now, this is a tough one for me. Like, I'm seriously thinking about putting this in S. I don't think it's above Empire, but this is a great movie because, I mean, again, this is the end of the story, right? I think they did it well.
Mm-hmm.
I really love the Ewoks, right? And
Yeah, me
that
too.
entire thing, like, that's just super awesome. I love beginning the movie in Jabba's palace, trying to rescue Han, and that entire scene
Yeah.
on Tatooine. There was
The
just a
Rancor
lot.
was really
The
cool.
Rancor, yes, so much awesome stuff. Now, again, it's going to be tough for me to decide whether I want it to be S or A, but I just like what they did with all of these characters, right? And like, this is one of those movies because it is the finale of the trilogy, it is important to know what happened beforehand, and that does ultimately impact what I think of this movie as a whole, because this is where you see the completion of a lot of characters and their development. I think they did such a great job with Vader. I think they did such a great job with Luke, with Solo, with Leia. Like so many side characters that had such a meaningful. I mean, even down to Obi-Wan, who really wasn't in a lot of 5 and 6 for a majority of the time, but his impact is still felt. It still matters. It's very significant. So for me, my consensus right here, I think I'm gonna go with an A, and it's gonna go above A New Hope. I don't know if I'm ready to put it in that S tier yet.
That's fair. I was thinking A as well, like a high A.
Yeah.
I think, yeah, it does go over A New Hope.
Okay.
I think, like you said, with even, just the barge scene alone, you've got Leia killing Jabba in that scene, but then the whole time, Luke is fighting everybody, Han Solo's running around, Chewie's running around, Boba
Yeah.
Fett. They end up, the Sarlacc is introduced. Like, there's so much going on in that one scene alone. And the whole movie is like that, where it's just scene after scene, just like that. Like you said, the Ewoks, that's so cool.
Yes.
Seeing them fight the stormtroopers, and that idea of like, yeah, you know what? With the right help, even a primitive culture can defeat the Empire, and the whole mentality behind that. Han Solo is one of my all-time favorite characters in Star Wars.
Yes.
Only because like he's such like a badass character. Like when you think about it, Han Solo really like he did so much. But this is a tangent, but like just one example is like he snuck up on Darth Vader, who was supposedly one of the best fighter pilots in the galaxy, plus who was force sensitive.
That's true.
And the Millennium Falcon, this big ass cargo, that's like pulling up on a cop with a semi truck without being noticed. Like when you think about it, Han Solo was flying a big rig, and he snuck up on Vader, highway patrolman, without the cruiser even realizing it. Like,
That's true.
Just that alone, really, really cool. And so I think this is definitely like this is top of A class. I don't think there's anything that I can think of in the entire series that might go above this, outside of maybe one of the prequels, and that's it.
Okay. I can't get over that analogy. That shit was too funny.
You know what I mean, though? Like, it's
No,
crazy.
you're right. You're right. Okay. All right, moving on to the prequels. And this is, we're going to know about this more than anything because we grew up on these movies. I can't tell you how many times I've watched each one of these movies. It's childhood, right? This is childhood in 9 hours right here. So, starting off
really is
with The Phantom Menace. When was the last time you got to see The Phantom Menace?
It's been within the last 6 months, I think.
Okay, same for me.
Because I remember right before winter break, I sat down with all my friends over in school, and we did a movie marathon where we watched all 3 prequels.
Okay.
I think that was the last time I saw them, but we watched all 3 in a row, 9 hours of Star Wars, and just sat down and did that, a huge overnighter, like right after finals, and then we all left for winter break.
Okay.
So I think it was like last December.
Okay. Yeah, and I would like to think that I'm around the same time frame as well, within the last 6 months, rough estimate. So, okay, but your thoughts on episode 1, The Phantom Menace?
Oh man. Okay. I think this episode is such a pivotal point for Star Wars.
Mm-hmm.
Because the original trilogy was fantastic, and it's really cool to see all that stuff, but it was just the 3 movies. And there was no, like, George Lucas wasn't talking about making more. We went, like, almost, 20 years before they made another one, and then 1999, The Phantom Menace comes out. And now we've introduced a new character, Qui-Gon, who's training Obi-Wan. So we watched Obi-Wan die. Like, we see the end of his life, but now we're looking at, like, the beginning. We see him as a Padawan who taught this amazing man that Alec Guinness played. And now we're introduced to Qui-Gon Jinn. Qui-Gon being a crazy, cool character. We get to meet Anakin as a kid. There's a lot of foreshadowing people don't necessarily realize he's Darth Vader until way later into the trilogy. But it's really cool. We see Padme, and we kind of see like them start to kind of have feelings, and we're like, okay, what's going on here? Like, there's a lot that just happens, and then you add in a lot of the. I think what's cool about this one too, it had the comedic steps that George Lucas took with characters like Jar Jar Binks, right? They had never really, like, the original trilogy, you don't watch it and laugh. Like, I can't really think of, outside of Han Solo making jokes, like, you're not really laughing at, like, stupid, there's no slapstick humor or anything like that. But then you look at, like, the Gungans, and you're laughing, and then you just go through the movie, and there's a lot of stuff where it's more like a kid-friendly thing, which it was geared towards kids. But then you also have, and the last thing I'm going to bring up, one of the coolest characters in Star Wars, one of the most iconic as well, Darth Maul.
Oh, yeah.
Darth Maul is introduced in this, and we see him along with, like, Sidious as a younger form, like, just all that stuff in there. I think, as a whole, this is a high A-list, if not S tier for me.
Oh, wow.
Because I think of how pivotal it was. I feel like this movie is the most important in the prequels because of what it did for Star Wars. It took a dead brand, essentially, because it died after the third movie. It dropped down, and it was like, okay, we did 3 movies, it was awesome, we made our money, done. And then this came out, and all of a sudden, now, it wasn't just one group of people, because the same people who watched the original one in movies were all having kids. And then their kids watched The Phantom Menace in the cinema, and it was the same thing. The toys came out, everything like that. And now you had another generation who was now living the Star Wars experience. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
So I think this is a high A, low S.
Okay.
Somewhere in there.
That's,
what do you think?
Okay, that's interesting. And, okay, to cut the chatter, I was going to say either B or C for me. Because...
Really?
Yes, because I do think that the comedic stuff is good, but I understand why people were so annoyed with Jar Jar Binks. Like, it was a little too much, you know? And
He's
I don't...
an annoying character.
Right, and I don't know if it was necessary. And I also think that I think, you know, you have to consider what comes after it as well with Attack of the Clones and Revenge of the Sith. I do feel like this is...
Both better movies.
They are better movies, you know, and that's why I don't feel comfortable putting The Phantom Menace that high. Because I do think, in terms of cultural significance, which what we were talking about earlier, I do think Return of the Jedi, I do think A New Hope is better in those aspects as well. So...
Agreed.
You know, at the very highest, I could put this at an A, but it's got to be at the bottom for me. But I would feel most comfortable putting this at a B because I don't think it's a bad movie. I do think it is heavily overshadowed by countless other movies that this franchise has to offer.
Yes.
But I still think that there's so much good that came out of it. Like you said, right? Characters like Qui-Gon, Obi-Wan Kenobi, even, you know, young Anakin Skywalker, and like even the pod race. I think the pod race, that whole sequence is very underappreciated as well, right? And then, like you said, the introduction of Darth Maul, Duel of the Fates. Like, you can't tell me you weren't getting excited when that was happening. So I do think that this movie does get a lot of disrespect, and it's very unwarranted. But I think that's really a huge part that plays in that is just how well the other 2 movies in this trilogy did. So I don't know. What do you think? Where should we put this? We gotta negotiate this one.
I think we could compromise with a low A or a high B.
Okay.
Either top of class for B or bottom of class for A.
Okay.
What do you think? Because I'm also thinking of the issue is I'm thinking of all the TV shows and stuff.
Yeah.
And I'm realizing how many A class things we're gonna have in A class.
Yeah.
It's gonna be huge.
No, and this is a good problem to have because that means that Star Wars is great. Which exactly. I mean, that wasn't even in question.
A lot of really good content.
Okay.
Which is obviously what we want.
I'll do this. Okay. I'll put it at the top of B just because if we ever move it, I'd rather be moving it up than moving it down.
That is true. Okay.
Yeah? Okay.
Yes.
Okay.
I'm good with that.
All right. Okay.
Top of B.
Attack of the
Attack
Clones.
of the
Yeah.
Clones.
And I know that this
Okay,
is I know that this is
I'm
one
gonna
of
go
your favorite
first here
movies.
real quick
Okay,
because
yeah.
people may not know this. This is okay. This outside of like the animated Clone Wars show, this is my favorite piece of Star Wars ever. This movie.
That's
I
incredible.
love Clone Troopers.
That's incredible.
I'm huge on Clone Troopers. Kind of the reason why we're naming this channel what we are with 501st Show. I'm wearing a 501st t-shirt right now. Like, I love the clones. I love their story, especially with Clone Wars, like when you look at like Domino Squad and everything like that. But what's really nice about Attack of the Clones is that you're seeing, we see the fight on Kamino, right, with Obi-Wan. Now as a master, he's not a Padawan anymore.
Right.
We see him as a master fighting Jango Fett, another one of the coolest characters in the entire Star Wars fandom. Like, I think he's awesome. Really, really interesting character. We see the Geonosians, really cool species. Like, I think one of the cooler alien species that, like, had a big role to play in Star Wars. We're seeing, we see the droids and everything like that. Now we're watching, like, the Clone Wars are happening. Right, or right at the beginning of the Clone Wars, essentially, where they're getting into it, and we're seeing Count Dooku, and just how all of that stuff is going on. This is the first time in Star Wars that we've seen a fallen Jedi, because in the past, all the Sith were just Sith, but now we're seeing Count Dooku, and we find out in this movie that he trained Qui-Gon Jinn, who we saw in The Phantom Menace. So people are realizing, whoa, like Jedi, sometimes they become Sith too because they fall to the dark side, like how Count Dooku did. And so we're seeing like all these new plays into it. Just as a movie as a whole, now we're also seeing like prime Anakin Skywalker.
Yeah.
Close to prime. I won't say prime actually.
Yeah, close
Close
to.
prime
Close to.
Anakin
Yeah.
Skywalker, where he's becoming like he's really getting into his own. I don't think we see prime until episode 3.
Yeah,
But
absolutely.
he's getting close. But it's like just all those things together. This puts it at an A-list for me.
Okay. I can work with that because I personally feel like this movie is better than The Phantom Menace as well. And so for me, I was thinking that low A, high B range. I think it's great. I think that this was the movie, in my opinion, this was more pivotal than episode 1. I know you said that episode 1 was pivotal. And I think that is
Fair.
It's a very neck and neck debate. It's just for me, I feel like this was a huge turning point for Star Wars because it introduced the Clone Troopers, which was never really mentioned before in any of the movies prior. And then what it did for the TV show, the animated TV show later on as well. I just think that this right here was where we truly expanded into the Star Wars universe. I know that one of the biggest knocks on this movie and just the entire, episode 1 through 3 is the dialogue, and people are not really happy about that. Now, for me personally, okay, I never found it to be that much of a problem. I honestly kind of like it because the worst lines, in my opinion, came from Anakin, but it was cringy.
I hate
it was
Anakin's
okay.
dialogue.
Yeah,
Everything else is fine.
Right. Here's the thing: cringy, corny, whatever you want to call it. I think it's okay, and part of me also feels like if that was to happen to any of the characters, that was the one, because Anakin, in a sense, is still kind of immature, and he says some of these things where it's kind of like, but like, let's be honest, all of us at that age, and I mean us as we're speaking right now, are still near the age, like we still say some things where it's kind of like, you could have said something else, and so I think that it's really fitting for the character. I know I'm trying to be very optimistic, and I'm almost trying to be the light for the fan base, because everything that you hear nowadays from Star Wars fans is so negative and they just complain and stuff. But I think that there is some good that you can take out of some bad work when you're looking at it from a dialogue aspect, where yes, I understand that is bad, but it could have been much worse, and for another character that would be much less fitting for that mistake to happen in. But in terms of the overall movie, I think that you hit it on the nose with all of the other stuff, and like, we didn't see enough of the Clone Troopers, and that's why I think when we talk about the Clone Wars show later on, it's going to be huge. But again, that introduction to them, the introduction to all the Jedi, we just got to see the numbers in full effect. And we got to see species like you mentioned. Again, this is the expansion of Star Wars here. a huge pivotal turning point. And again, I think another good sequel
It sets
to
up so much as well.
yeah, it's
Like
it's a
it
fantastic
leads to a lot
setup.
of things in the future. Without this movie, half of these TV shows never would have happened, if
Yeah.
not all of them.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yep.
So yeah, I agree.
Okay. So
I think we can both agree then A class probably.
yeah, and I think do we put it below I think we do put it below A New Hope. I just think like again, what
Yeah.
carries A New Hope I think is that nostalgia factor and the cinema impact, I think. Right? So we'll put episode
agree with
2
that.
Attack of the Clones at the bottom of the A tier. Okay. Now we move on to Revenge of the Sith. I guess I'll start off with this one because this is the clear-cut number 1 in my opinion. Okay?
Yep.
We grew up on this. Okay? I've made that very clear. But I mean, we're talking about from the second that this movie starts until the second it ends. You feel it. Like you feel it. Like you can feel the movie.
Yeah.
And it's all kinds of things. I think just that opening scene where they're fighting in space is just so badass. I mean, incredible, right?
Yes.
And then we shift over. They're fighting on the massive freighter after that against General Grievous, saving Palpatine. Dooku dies, and this is kind of where we see like that turning point where Anakin moves to the dark side as well. And I think Order 66. I mean, Order 66 happens after the first hour of the movie, right? Which just shows like how much more they could have done. And I'm glad that they didn't do anymore because in my opinion, this is the perfect movie. But again, we get to see a prime Obi-Wan Kenobi. We get to see a prime Anakin Skywalker and even their fight on Mustafar. Like there is so much going on, yet you still feel like in a sense maybe we didn't get enough. And you know, again, that's why the Clone Wars is there as well. I just think in terms of action and the emotions that, you know, it provokes, it doesn't get more well-rounded than this. I mean, everything was and again, this is the bridge. This is the connector from the 70s and then, you know, where it was left off when that movie started.
This shows what started in the original Star Wars.
Yes.
Like, this one really leads up to it. Yeah.
And like
I agree.
Oh.
Everything you're saying. There are so many points of the movie that are so good
yeah.
that we watch them happen, and it's like, whoa, like just the entire thing. See, I think the biggest thing that people don't realize too, when you think about all the original six, prequels and original series, every single movie has lulls where it's not constant fighting. Revenge of the Sith, I feel like actually is the most content in one movie fighting wise.
Yes.
It's the most action. It's like this is the most action you'll get in any Star Wars movie because it takes out a lot of those scenes that they could have done with maybe dialogue. They chose to do it through conflict.
Yes.
Even if it was like a minor fighting, but we saw so many cool fight scenes.
Yeah.
Like you saw, this was the best lightsaber content we got for a while. I'd say it's still probably close to number one.
Yes.
If not, yeah, I think just the duel on Mustafar is the best lightsaber fight we've ever had in any Star Wars content, animated or live action. And just all those things, the dialogue itself is so powerful. It's so well done. The storyline, like it really, now we see the birth of Vader.
Yeah.
We see when he changes. And I think when you think about it, Star Wars is the story of Anakin Skywalker becoming Darth Vader. All 6 movies, the original ones, are focused on this one character. So this whole movie, or this whole series essentially, has been about this one character. We see him from the day he's born, basically, until the day he dies in these 6 movies. But this was like the most pivotal part of that because we see when his character transitions. We see when he goes from, you know, that man to machine. That idea where he becomes a whole new person. And I think that's a really cool aspect of it. And then, you know, from there with Order 66 as well, we see the 501st Legion, which was under Anakin, become the 501st Imperial Division under Vader. So he kept the same troopers and everything like that. In fact, we see Jesse go on later in, this is more Legends, but we see that he becomes the commander of Vader's fist, which was a small legion in the 501st that was like his top trusted. They were his Rex and Fives of post Clone Wars, after Order 66. And it's just, all that stuff is so cool when you think about it. This goes A tier for me.
Ooh, okay.
If not S.
Okay.
Like, I could see low S, mid to high A.
Okay.
I don't think it's the best content, but I think it's really, really close. Like, it's up there, top 5 minimum.
Okay. All right. So,
where do you rank it?
I mean, for me, right, this is my number 1 of all time. And so
Yeah.
I'll be okay if we put this at low S.
Fair.
Like I can
I don't think it's like a high S, but I think a low S is very fair.
Okay. Okay. All right. Look, I'm just happy it's an S. Okay.
Mm-hmm. This is a really solid list.
It is. It really is, honestly.
Not gonna lie.
I hope everyone else feels the same. But yeah. Okay.
I'm feeling good. And now we get to fill up the lower tiers with the sequels.
Yeah, so actually, funny enough, like I was what is it called, like a family friend and their kids and stuff, and I asked them like, oh, what's your favorite Star Wars movie, right? And this is the generation after us, and he said that his favorite was number 7. So it's just, again, like like how you just reacted is probably how our parents feel when we say we like the prequels more than the
The
originals.
prequels.
So
Yeah, probably.
it
And I get it. It's a generational thing.
It definitely
it
is.
was 2015 when
Yeah.
Episode 7 came out.
yeah,
We were all in high school.
yeah,
And, like, I remember seeing it in the cinema.
yeah,
But I don't know.
yeah, and
Okay.
we
Where do you rank Episode 7, though?
yeah, okay. See, we talked about this before, where it's kind of one of those, they just reuse the A New Hope story, right, to start off this whole new thing. Here's the thing, right? I don't think it's a bad movie. I don't think it's a good movie, which is why I would put it at C. Now I don't know where in the C tier it ends up, but we can't lie. When this movie came out, and this is how I feel personally, I was hyped. And when it finished,
yeah,
I was
me
like,
too.
oh my God, like, this is awesome. Like, Star Wars is back.
Yeah.
And we have a lot of good characters who have a ton of potential. Now, I understand they didn't live up to that afterwards. But if we're looking at this movie individually, I would say
From the
it's
moment,
it's
yeah.
average. It's average. Amongst the Star Wars movies, I would say
That's
C.
fair. You know what? Yeah, I'd give this a C class.
Okay.
Only because you're right. If you look at this and you're like, okay, as a movie standpoint, it's not bad. It has your action, it has your comedy, it has your love story, it has everything you need for a Hollywood movie. It
Yeah.
checked all the boxes.
Yes.
But for us, we're comparing it to the 6 that we just went over.
Mm-hmm.
So for us, we're like, oh my God, what is this turd that they just dropped?
Yeah.
Like, this is terrible. But when you look at it from a movie perspective, you're right. I think it is an average movie. It's not great. Like, nobody left the movie and was like, oh my God, this is amazing. But nobody was like, oh, that was the worst thing I've ever seen.
Yeah.
And like, nobody walked out halfway through or anything like that. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So I think C class is fair.
Yeah.
I
And
will say, I believe this is the best movie in the sequel series.
I agree. But again, that's the thing. Like I mentioned, like, there was so much potential with a lot of these characters, with Rey, with Finn, with Kylo. The list can go on, and even
This
Snoke.
really messed up with Finn.
More
than anybody.
They completely messed up this entire thing, right? And I just feel like
Yeah.
they had themselves in a good spot, and it just went downhill from there. So it's just very unfortunate. And me personally, right? I know we hear a lot about how are they going to fix this? How are they going to fill in, all the missing pieces and stuff like that? I personally think that there has been so much backlash on this that they should just get rid of it. I mean, it's not like they lose the money.
They need to retcon them.
Yes, they need to retcon them. They're not losing the money. You don't have to retract those billions of dollars that you
They
got.
already made the money. It's not an issue.
I'm just saying,
It's-
if you can
I agree.
admit to your fans that you messed up, they will respect you
Yeah.
more than just keeping it up. And here's the thing: you can retcon them and still have people watch it. they can still watch it. You don't have to like
Yeah,
completely discontinue it and say, no, no one's ever gonna lay their eyes on this again. Because yes, there are people who still like it, but the large
yeah. Nobody's
majority, and
saying
even
turn
us
off of
who,
Disney Plus.
right, and we would call ourselves advocate Star Wars fans. I mean, even we're not huge fans of this, and
Yes.
what it does for the lore and just everything, it's not good in my opinion. So
Yeah,
anyway,
I
we
agree.
still have to do the
I
other
agree.
two. Look, very quickly, I'll
Yeah,
tell you this: Last Jedi is a D for me, which we don't have an F tier, but it would be in the F tier. You know,
it would be.
there were some good things. Don't get me wrong. I think the throne room scene where Snoke dies and then Kylo and Rey are fighting off the guards. I think that was probably one of the coolest lightsaber battles that we've seen. But
Yeah,
you know,
that's fair.
and even
It
Luke,
was good fighting
it
content.
was good fighting content, and even Luke projecting himself on a completely different planet to save what was left of the
Mhm.
rebels, essentially. I mean, there were some good
Also
things,
true.
but you know, I
Pretty
mean,
cool.
that entire sequence where they're using the rest of their gas to slowly get away from the First Order fleet, and that whole thing with Rose and Finn and trying to find the gambler and so it was terrible, and it just felt like a complete
Yeah,
waste of time. I will never be watching that movie again.
I agree. I agree.
This is a D for me.
I think yeah, that's a D for me too. I just there's nothing else to say. It's just when it came down to it, everything you talked about. Plus, they also okay. What made me the maddest, I think, was them not taking full potential of Finn.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely.
Finn was the golden ticket, and they threw it in the trash with the rest of the wrapper.
Yeah,
You know what I mean?
yeah,
Like, if Disney had this was their potential to showcase a stormtrooper, an ex-stormtrooper, finds out he has powers, and then becomes and goes through and actually makes it. Now, this would be the first time in canon. In Legends, they had clones who were force sensitive.
yeah. Right.
And you had stuff like that. You know, you look at Starkiller as one prime example where they made, Darth Vader cloned Starkiller after he killed the original one. Starkiller was his apprentice. He turned back to the light side, fights Vader. Vader kills him, clones him, and then uses his clone as a second apprentice. Like, just basically just does a whole new one. He wasn't as strong, but the clone was still force sensitive.
Right,
And
right.
so we see that it was like, that, but that's all Legends. That's games. Like, that's from Force Unleashed. And so that's a video game. You're looking at comic books and things like that aren't classified as canon. But if they did this with Finn, where even if he wasn't like force sensitive or like super strong in the force, if he just had a little bit, and the fact that he was a stormtrooper
Mhm.
turned Jedi
Mhm.
would have been crazy. Plus, they put him on all the posters.
Yeah,
Like
yeah.
Finn was all over the posters holding this blue lightsaber. We see him. He's more Skywalker than Rey, in my opinion. And when it comes down to it, they messed up so bad. Because if they did that, I swear it would have been an incredible part of the series. And I think honestly, just that one move, making that character into a Jedi,
Mhm.
would have saved the sequels from 90% of all the stuff that we say about it. Because the biggest gripe that everybody has, it's two things. Finn not becoming a Jedi and Rey saying that she's a Skywalker. Those are the two things that pissed everybody off.
Yeah, yeah.
And so yeah, no, I agree.
You know,
And then that leads into the next one too.
so wait. Can I say this right? And
Go.
this has nothing to do with, oh, you're a sexist or oh, you're a racist. But Disney has made it very clear that they are striving for diversity, and this just looks like they were too indecisive. They
Yeah.
wanted the minority and they wanted the female character, and they couldn't decide which one they wanted to be the
Which
star.
one? Mm-hmm.
And you're right, they fumbled
And
it.
you know what it is? I wonder if so. Okay, a lot of people know this. This is kind of common knowledge, but when Disney was promoting this movie, they had a different movie poster made for China. China is one of the
Okay.
biggest. Yeah, it's one of the biggest audiences. So a lot of movies in general market to Asia, right? Because it's like, hey, there's a lot of people there, which means a lot of money. But what's interesting is that Disney actually had to make a brand new poster because China didn't want Finn on the front with the lightsaber and everything like that because he was a black guy. And
Wow.
that
Is
was
that
like, it was
serious?
very well publicized and everything. Yeah,
I
yeah,
didn't
you
know
can look it
that.
up. It's a Google search away. But that's a big thing. And I
Wow.
wonder if Disney was thinking like, okay, if we make this guy a Jedi, would that hurt our sales in other places? Like, I wonder if it was a marketing decision
Mm-hmm.
or if it was just they weren't thinking about it and they were like, oh no, nobody's going to care about this stormtrooper. We should focus on Rey. So I wonder which one it is, but that's kind of one of my theories. I think when it came down to it, they were just looking at money, which is fair. Right?
Yeah.
That's the
Okay.
point of these movies.
Mm-hmm.
But I think that they were looking at that money and they were like, man, this has potential to lose us a lot of money in Asia if we go with this storyline. And I think that's part of the reason why they didn't create Finn in all of his glory the way they could have. Which I think is a real shame because
That is a shame.
They lost so much potential with that character. I will say though, real quick, one saving grace of this movie is Poe Dameron and BB-8. I think their combination and that Poe Dameron is the closest that we've ever gotten to a Han Solo
Yeah.
outside of the original trilogy. And I think that was on purpose, but it was also like he was still his own character. Nobody looked at him and was like, "Oh, this guy's just, they're just trying to make a new Han."
Yeah.
But it was still like it was enough of a nod to the original one.
Yeah.
Where it was like, okay, I know what they were going for here. This was a good way to do it. So I think that is one saving grace. That's like the only compliment I can think of the sequel, but it's there.
I will say like that entire and this has nothing to do with The Last Jedi, but that entire fight scene on Tankadana, right, where we see him really begin
Yeah.
his whole piloting thing and how good he is, like that sequence was really awesome. So again,
Yeah.
more benefit to the first of the three movies. Rise of Skywalker. Now, I'll tell you this. I like Rise of Skywalker as an individual movie, okay? If you disconnect it, and
Yes.
I know that's not how it works, but if you disconnect it from everything else,
I know what you're saying.
right? Like it was a cool movie. It was a cool movie, but in terms of the Star Wars story, you basically said everything that happened before it didn't matter, and the biggest,
Yeah.
the biggest thing that points towards that is bringing back Palpatine. For what reason? Why? We still don't even know how he came back.
Yeah.
Again, too many question marks with a finale. And again, like I said, great action. I like I think this is one of the most memorable scenes in Star Wars when, Rey stabs Kylo Ren on the remnants of the Death Star. And then after that, Han Solo appears, and that's really the turning point for Kylo Ren. Like I think that was a huge impact,
Yeah.
on that entire storyline. I think Kylo Ren was one of the characters that they didn't mess up during that entire time. I think that he was a great character. Honestly, my favorite character from the sequels. But in terms of comparing it to the rest of the movies and connecting it to the storyline, because I'm not going to give this one a pass for the sake of this video, this is tough, man. And it was almost an impossible recovery after what happened in The Last Jedi. I mean,
Yeah.
and people say that this is the worst movie, and the only reason why I give it the benefit of the doubt is because what are you supposed to do after The Last Jedi happened? There isn't much you can do. There's not a lot
That
to
is
work with.
true.
And so if you're gonna tell me that this was worse than The Last Jedi after the setup that it was provided, I think that that's completely unfair, and that's why I do talk about this movie individually, because there's a lot that could have been done better, to help it out.
I feel like. All right. Because I get what you're saying, and I agree. I think this goes to a high D for me, or a low, very low C tier.
Yeah,
I think this is a high D because you're right.
Okay.
When it comes down to it, this movie was a Band-Aid on a bullet hole, right?
Yes. Another great
Episode
analogy,
8
dude.
But it's true, you know. Episode 8 really messed it up for Disney, but then episode 9 was still bad, but not as bad. And so it was a big drop down, and then they brought it up a little bit. And I think that I knew what they were trying to do. There was so much in there that I really didn't like. I didn't like the fact that like first, the kiss
Oh
between
no.
Kylo Ren and Rey, right? And then on
Oh
top
my
of that,
God.
Rey brings Kylo Ren back to life, basically, right, with the Force heal. So
Yeah.
now she's Force healing. We've got all these ghosts in the background thinking, hey, what the hell? This was an option the whole time, you know?
Yeah.
I think it's weird that they gave that power to Rey.
Yeah.
And it's just, I don't like that they brought back Palpatine. I think that was a very poor decision. I understand
Absolutely.
what they were going for, but it was very poorly executed.
Absolutely.
And I wish that they didn't. I would have much preferred to see Snoke in, like, if they kept him alive until this movie and he was our main bad guy. You know, he got away in the eighth one, and then in 9 they finally catch up to him or something like that. We see another one. That would have been I think that would have been a lot better. Maybe even, they sacrifice Kylo Ren.
Yeah.
It's one of those things. He turns back to the light side, kills Snoke, but he, injures himself. Maybe not dies, but like he loses an arm or something like that in true Skywalker fashion. But all that stuff in general, I don't know. I didn't like the movie as a Star Wars fan, but I think you're right. When you set it aside and you just look at, okay, from a Hollywood perspective, it's still an entertaining film. Like, I wouldn't say, like, oh, I'm never watching this again. I might watch it in the future.
Yeah.
But I'm not going to go into it thinking like a Star Wars fan. I'm going to think, oh, I'm bored. I want something with some action, but, it's still, whatever. I like lightsabers. Let me watch this.
Yeah. Yeah, that's well said, and that basically summarizes what that movie's all about. I will say, in terms of action, I think what was super cool was when Palpatine lit the entire sky with his force electricity fingers.
Yeah.
Yes, I thought that was pretty
cool.
awesome because we've never seen anything like that before. But again, like
Yeah.
so many unanswered questions, and I think you bring up Snoke potentially being that guy, and that's what it looked like from the beginning. And I just don't know why they didn't stick with that. Again, so many good characters with poor execution. And look, I mean, like, I think, and this is the thing too, like, the casting matters, and I mean, they got Andy Serkis to be Snoke.
Yeah.
And it's like, what better person could you have to portray that type of character to be,
Exactly.
right? It's just, it's so sad. It really is.
Yeah. I think they had so much potential with Snoke as a real bad villain. And if they wanted to somehow bring Palpatine into it, I think what they should have done was, like, Snoke was a failed clone of Palpatine. Palpatine ends up dying because they weren't able to clone him, but he still kind of is living through Snoke, where Snoke is like a combination of the two. I think that would have made a lot more sense versus just bringing Palpatine back.
Yeah. Nothing's
Like,
clear.
That would have just made the storyline. I think a lot of fans would have been like, oh, okay, they were trying to clone him. Snoke was the result. So he has the memories of Palpatine, but he's also like his own character. And I think that would have gone over so much better, because a lot of people would have turned around and just been like, oh, okay, this was another plot. He failed. That's that.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
okay, it is what it is. We've got a new character now who is part of that, like, idea. It's still an homage to Palpatine, but at the same time, he's not the same character, versus they brought back Palpatine. He's being held up by, like, robotic arms
Yeah.
on Exegol because he can't even stand.
Right.
And it's like, this is just, it's weird. I don't like how they did it. But anyway,
No, yeah.
anyway, not the best movies. Obviously, you can see that we're passionate about this. This is what happens when you talk to Star Wars fans about the sequels. Like we've said, none of these movies are bad from a Hollywood perspective. It's just compared to other Star Wars films and compared to Star Wars canon,
Yeah.
they're not very good.
No, it's not. And here's the thing too, and I don't know if I'm speaking for both of us, but I mean me personally, like I'm not that critical of these kind of things. And so it's really got to be bad for me to be like this about it. Like I love Star Wars, yes, but like still, I'm gonna give a lot of it the benefit of the doubt. I mean, you've seen that as I was talking about some of the movies from before as well. But yeah, I mean, this just wasn't it. Speaking of a movie that was it though from Disney, Rogue One was spot on.
Yes.
And in my opinion, this is one of the best Star Wars movies of the bunch. All right, plain and simple. So I mean, I'll let you kick this one off. What do you think about Rogue One?
I mean, when it comes down to it, I think Jyn Erso and obviously Cassian Andor, really cool characters. I love what they did from this side because, okay, here's the other thing, right? In Star Wars, the bad guy always loses. In this one, they didn't.
Mm-hmm.
And this was one of the first ones. I think it was really cool to see, like, okay, the bad guy didn't lose. Like, they didn't beat the Empire. But with a sacrifice, Jyn Erso, Saw Gerrera, Cassian Andor, like, there's a whole list of characters. Blaze Malbus is in this. What's the guy played by Donnie Yen? The blind Force user.
Oh my goodness.
Character's name. But like they've got a lot of
yeah.
A-list actors doing these things, like really cool characters. And when it comes down to it, that's how a rebellion happens. I think it's the most realistic Star Wars movie.
Yes, absolutely.
Where it's like, okay, hey, you're gonna die, but they went out of their way for their cause. They fought till the bitter end. And then in the end of the movie, they all die, but they do it by imploding the planet that they're on, basically, the whole power plant thing, and that slows the Empire down a lot. So with their sacrifice, they saved how many other people? And it's just the whole film itself, I think, is really tastefully done, because it shows the evils of war, but it also shows, like, the realism of it, where it's just like, okay, hey, this is how it works. This is what's going to happen. Here we are. We made the best out of a bad situation.
Yeah.
And this is what we got to work with. So for me, this is an A-tier movie. I think it's a solid one. I'd even be willing... Actually, never mind. I was going to say above Attack of the Clones.
Yeah.
I feel like Attack of the Clones is still a bit better. But I'd say this is a close second to that in this list. So right now it's at the bottom of A.
Okay.
But I think by the end of the video, we're gonna be like in the middle of A class because I think it's a solid movie. I think it's really, really good.
Okay. Now, you've done a lot of budging for me, so I'll budge for you on this one. I will put it at the bottom of A for now. And for me, Rogue One is an S tier movie for me. I mean, when we talk, and here's the thing, we asked, or we didn't ask Star Wars, but Star Wars decided to literally make brand new characters for a movie that is smack dab in the middle of a very significant turning point in Star Wars, right? I mean, this is the transition from the Republic to the Empire. The Clone Wars is over, and we just have this middle section where, I mean, we don't know a whole lot about. And they brought in a ton of new unknown characters and they just hit it all right on the nose. And I just think that, like, in terms of the balance of action and character development, just in this one video, like, there was such a good balance. And like you said, right, the good guys ultimately got a small win, but I don't think either side would say, like, oh yeah, like, everything went as planned. But again, their ability to create these characters, do what they did, make a significant impact, make us feel a certain way once the movie is over, give us that hero type ending that you were speaking of and the realism of war, and then just the like literally the connecting tying, part of where this movie ends off and where A New Hope begins. Like, you can't do it any better without forcing anything. Like, and they didn't force anything, right? And I just think that,
Yeah.
I mean, you couldn't have asked for a better movie to tie in the original trilogy and the prequels. Like, just, it's perfection, honestly.
That is true. I'd be willing to put this at the top of A.
You put it at the top of A? Okay. Okay.
I'd put it at the top of A. Because
Okay.
you're right. When you think about all that stuff, like, I think it really does. You're right. There's a lot of stuff that goes into it that they did really, really tastefully.
Mm-hmm.
That it was. I think this is also, like, this is the first time they ever made a standalone movie.
Yes.
And
Yes.
so they made all these new characters, and we all went into it thinking, like, okay, this is cool. Maybe it's another, trilogy or whatever. But then you get to the end of the movie and you realize, like, oh, okay, there's no cliffhanger here. Like,
Yeah.
this
This is
is
it.
it.
Yeah.
You
Yeah.
know what I
Yes.
mean? Like, there's a lot of finality to it
Yes.
because everybody dies.
Yes.
But it's like it's a good way of doing it too, though. I like that. What makes me mad about the whole Alderaan thing where they just blow it up with the Death Star?
Mm.
I know the point of it, but I was like, man, this is like such a crazy power and everything like that. With Rogue One, the planet essentially blows up. But it's done because of like what's on the planet. They blow up the factory or the mine or whatever like that's in it. This huge power essentially explodes and it implodes your entire planet. I think that show of force still is on par with everything that like Star Wars has shown between, the sequel one and then the original Death Stars and stuff.
Mm-hmm.
But I think it was still a really cool way of them to do it. Like it really worked out nicely. But I think a solid movie.
It really did. And I think the thing too is like when you have these standalone movies, like, and you have all these new characters, you don't know who's going to make it and who's not, right? And yeah, you could say, oh, okay, well, we knew that a lot of these characters were going to die because we didn't see them in the original trilogy. And that's simply just not true. You can say that now that the movie's over and you've seen it already, but we could have easily just said, oh, these people just became members of the rebellion and we move on from there,
And it's
right?
done.
And we've seen that in more recent Star Wars shows as well. And so I just think that this is super awesome. And
Bad Batch is a prime example of that.
it really,
We'll talk about
it
it
is.
once we get there. But yeah.
And we're talking about Rogue One. We cannot forget to mention the Darth Vader hall scene. I mean, one of the most badass things Star Wars has ever put out. I mean, just
really, really cool. And it was
Holy
nice
crap.
to see that remastered.
yes.
We had
Yes.
already seen it before, but seeing it with, 1980s technology versus what we had in 2016 or 2017 when this came out, like, it was worlds of difference. And that itself was so cool to watch. Because it was like we got to rewatch the other one, but better.
Yeah.
It was just like the new and improved version. But yeah, no, that's true.
I think this movie is a great indicator. You can find out who's the real Star Wars fans and who's not. Because if this movie is not in consideration for the top of someone's list, they don't know what they're talking about. Respectfully. Because this movie is fantastic, honestly. Speaking of a movie that I don't feel was fantastic, Solo, A Star Wars Story. This movie, I don't know. I really don't know how to feel about it. It's hard to play the role of such an iconic character. But I mean, what are your thoughts here on Solo?
I think it was cool that they made one on Han Solo. I mean, like I said earlier in this video, Han Solo is one of my favorite characters. But I'm not gonna lie, I didn't like this movie very much. I think I knew what they were trying to do, and it's cool to have a origin story, in a sense. I mean, Darth Maul makes an appearance in this. That was pretty cool. But honestly, outside of that, like, this is a C-class movie for me.
Okay.
It'd be an upper C, maybe a low B.
Okay.
But I just because of the characters and stuff. But I don't know. I didn't like how they did it. Like I didn't like the story. I don't think the actor did a really good job of making a new version of Han Solo.
Yes.
But I think a lot of people wanted to see like that old version Harrison Ford Han Solo.
Yeah.
That was
We
the
didn't get that.
Solo that we wanted to see.
Yeah.
So yeah, he did
Yeah.
a good job and made it his own, but I don't think he should have. You know, like I don't think he should have made it his own. I think he should have put his energy into replicating what Harrison Ford did because that's what fans wanted. But I think, yeah, when it comes down to it, I'd say upper C,
Okay.
maybe low B.
For me personally, I mean, I was shuffling between C and D, to be quite honest with you. And
Okay.
again, like with like you hit it right on the nose again. With the whole, making his own character thing. Like we just didn't get like that snarkiness. We didn't get like that, that
Yeah.
backhandedness that Han Solo provides with his character. And I think I would put this in C, and I think I'd put it below the Rise, or sorry, not Rise of Skywalker. I'm completely
Force
blanking.
Awakens.
Episode 7, yes, The Force Awakens. Thank you.
Yeah.
I would put it below there, and I think, again, I would return to watch The Force Awakens more often than I would with Solo. But I think the whole thing, how did he get the Millennium Falcon? What was his friendship like with Lando? Where did he meet Chewbacca?
Yeah.
Like all that stuff is cool, but then you have things like the original story, like how did he get his name? That was lame as hell, honestly. And
Yeah.
then we even have this thing with Kira and Crimson Dawn, and Darth Maul is in there. Like I just didn't understand it. Like, and we still like
Yeah.
don't even really know like what Crimson Dawn is and like what their like. It just it was
I would
all
say
over
we
the
saw
place.
more of them in Clone Wars than we did in actual Solo.
Yeah, it was
Like, it
just,
was
I
just a
don't know.
weird.
Weird.
I don't know. I
Yeah.
didn't like it.
I'll put this. I think C. I think because you were saying shuffling between B and C, I was shuffling between C
I
and
think
D.
C is fair.
Yeah.
C is fair.
Would you put it below or above The Force Awakens?
I'd put it below.
Okay, I agree.
Only because I think even with all the mistakes that they made in the sequels, The Force Awakens still had a lot of really interesting characters.
Yes.
And we still saw Jedi, Sith, plus Stormtroopers, plus smugglers, plus like all these different things. And when it comes down to it too, this is gonna sound kind of silly, but Force Awakens, it had the OG Han Solo. We still got to see
That's
Han Solo.
true.
We
Yes,
saw
exactly.
Chewbacca.
Exactly.
But I still think old Harrison Ford was still better than like this new Solo guy.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, dude, you can't tell me that when he died in Force Awakens, you weren't like, no. Like I was like that.
I know.
Like that was like.
I was like, no.
It's not awesome in the sense that he died because no one wanted that. He wanted that, but I'm just saying like it was
wanted
like,
it,
oh my
yeah.
god, like there's no way they actually killed off Han Solo. Okay.
That was my thing. I was just surprised that Disney, for lack of a better term, had the balls
Yeah.
to go and make a decision like that. I was like, wow, really? Like,
Yeah.
whoa. I know Harrison Ford was pushing for it pretty heavily because he didn't want to be involved in the Star Wars universe anymore. But still, I was like, interesting that they actually like allowed it, But
They-
yeah. No, I think I like where that's at.
Okay. Moving on here to the Clone Wars movie. Now, this was an interesting one, but again, they were exploring a different avenue with this, with the animated series and stuff. And, the one thing I always hear about this is, how whiny and, sassy Ahsoka is and stuff. And that is all completely true.
Yeah.
Look, I think it was cool just because, again, this has a lot of nostalgia for us. This was our childhood, like, the Clone Wars. Like, we watched the animated series all the time. And so, I mean, for me, plain and simple, right? Like, not a ton of memorable things from this movie. I would put it in the C tier, and I would put it just above Solo.
Okay. So the only I'm thinking B tier.
Okay.
And the reason why is because I felt like this movie, the one like memorable thing I have about it, it was cool because it showed a lot of the Hut clan.
It did, yes.
And we didn't really get a lot of that until like the later seasons of Clone Wars.
Yeah.
But even that, like, I just, because of the Huts and how specific it was and just the storyline in general, I think it was an interesting movie. I would put it. I'll tell you what. I'd say we keep it C,
Hmm.
but I think it's above episode 7.
Okay,
Only
I can live
because
with
of
that.
that factor
I can live with
where
that.
it showcased a new species that obviously we had seen Jabba and stuff, right? But we didn't see the Hutt clan as the cartel that they actually were until way later. We didn't realize, there were a lot of different Hutts, and it was a really powerful crime syndicate too. And like people don't
Absolutely.
realize the strength that they had. We were talking about Crimson Dawn. The Hutts overshadowed Crimson Dawn, no problem.
Oh yeah,
The Hutts were
absolutely.
bigger than them. The Hutts were bigger than the Pike Syndicate.
Yep.
I think when it comes down to it, just long story short, I think this goes to a C class because of the Hutts, and for the first time we saw how truly powerful they were, and I think it was a cool way to showcase a really interesting family, a really interesting species too,
Hmm.
without like making a whole show about them or anything like that. Because now every time we go back and we see a Hutt, whether it's Jabba or anyone else, this kind of pops up in our brain where we're like, oh yeah, okay, I remember there's the crime syndicate. Like we know all these things about them, and it's because of this movie. So I
Okay.
think definitely pretty cool.
Yeah, and I'm blanking on the Hut's name, the little
Zero
baby.
the Hut.
No, not Zero. It was a
Oh, the
baby. The
baby.
baby, because they were trying to return him, right, and stuff.
Yeah, that was Jabba's kid.
Yeah.
I
I
forget what his name
I
is.
wish they touched more upon like where he ended up.
What happened to him?
Yeah.
Yeah,
But dude,
that's true. That would have been cool.
that dude was low key a sellout during that movie. Like him like getting sick during the mission and stuff like that. Like, bro, like
Yeah,
you
for
already
real.
causing enough trouble like getting stolen. Which like it's not like his fault, but
Like,
like,
dude, I
you
know
know.
you're like 2, but skill issue, bro.
Yeah.
Like,
You're a hot man. Act like it.
yeah.
Okay.
It's like, come on.
Um,
Do better.
okay, the Clone Wars. So this is from season 1 through 7. I mean,
I mean, come on. It's an S tier.
it's an
bro.
S tier, man.
What are we even talking about here? Clone
Um,
Wars? Like, this is. See, the hardest part is going to be finding where in S tier it goes.
okay, see, okay. Here for me, it's at the bottom of the S tier, right? But again,
Okay?
like I'm shuffling between two movies here that I mean, I will if you told me that these were the only two things that I can watch for the rest of my life, I wouldn't even complain. I honestly wouldn't. So
Honestly, yeah. Me too.
I think it does get knocked down, and I'm saying knocked down as if it's like not in the S tier, so don't take that so harshly.
Yeah, exactly.
Like part of it has to do like there's a lot of filler episodes, right? And like that's like with any show, and again, it's animated. Like the live action stuff, I'll always prefer over the animated stuff, and for me, that's the reason why it's gonna be at the bottom of S. But why is it an S? Season 7 has a lot to do with it, but I think we got to make a connection with the clones and realize that they are more than just clones. These are all
Mm-hmm.
technically clones, but they all have their own individual personalities. And we even saw that
Yeah.
with the droids too on the separatist side, which I thought was super interesting. And just the development of so many background characters prior to this, they did a great job. They really did. But for me, it would be at the bottom of the S tier.
That's fair. I am still. I'm still debating between bottom of S or middle.
Okay, I can budget the middle, honestly.
I'm going between Revenge of the Sith and this. And the reason why I'm saying that, so yes, I agree, lots of filler episodes. When you watch this series, it is so long, but the difference though, like even with all the filler episodes, I never had a moment where I was like, "Oh man, this is so boring."
Oh
I
yeah.
only ever had times where I was like, "Oh, like I wish they did a better job, or like I wish it was more action or more meaningful.
Mm-hmm.
But I will say when it was a meaningful arc, like the top arcs that I can think of are obviously when Anakin, Obi-Wan, and Ahsoka go to that realm and they meet the
Oh my
Force,
goodness,
like the living
yes.
Force, basically.
Yes.
That's a really cool one. The Umbara arc,
Mm-hmm.
where we've got Commander Krell
Yep.
and clones versus clones
Yep.
without realizing it. Seeing that was that's a crazy arc. Domino Squad was another
Yep.
really
Yep.
interesting one because that showcased the clones' personalities. Um, I think like just those three arcs alone had so much to do with it. And then obviously in season 7, the finishing off with the Order 66 arc, and we see like Rex and Ahsoka versus basically the entire 501st, and how they do that, and how they go on about that. It's just really, really interesting stuff. That's why I'm debating back and forth, but I feel like for now we might change this later on if we go back and revise.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm good with bottom of S
Okay. Okay.
because I still feel like Revenge of the Sith. Honestly, bro, it's that Mustafar scene that's the make or break
Yeah,
for me,
it really
and that's
is.
why I put it above.
Yo, and see, like, this is the thing, and you mentioned a lot of really significant things. I think the ones that stand out to me, I mean, definitely when Ahsoka is, opts out of the Jedi order, essentially,
Yeah,
and like, I mean, for me, like, she's one of like, I mean, could you consider her the main character of Clone Wars? You could, but like,
yeah,
just the way that it ends. I mean, even with her and the whole story on Mandalore and her fighting Maul,
hmm
it's incredible, man. It really is. I mean,
yeah.
if you
That is true.
haven't
The
gotten a
Mandalore
chance,
arcs are so good,
yeah, no,
all of them.
it's
Like
awesome.
there isn't a single one. Yeah, no, I agree.
So it's a long series, and we talked about fillers and stuff, but
Yeah,
like Armand said, right? A lot of filler episodes, but it's all worth watching. And I mean, once you get to the end, it enhances that
it's crazy.
feeling by 200%.
Yeah.
So
And I mean, okay, so I will say this. I've seen the series probably 3 or 4 times. Um, because I absolutely love this.
I
I've
did not
watched the
know that.
entire thing front to back that many times. Yeah. But I will say what I did was the first time I saw it, I watched it in order of the episodes, like as they came out.
Hmm. Oh, I
if you
see.
watch it if you watch it from the chronological order, there are a lot of websites that you can find the exact episode list. You start at like it's episode 4 of like season 3 is the first episode chronologically. But if you go based off of that account and you watch this whole series, there aren't any filler episodes really, because everything goes through with a chronological idea. And so it's when you watch it in that order, it takes a little more time because you got to pick the right episode. But I will say it is well worth it
I
because
see.
when you do that, the storyline matches up so much more. Because if you watch it in the order that the episodes came out, like how they're listed on Disney Plus, you're gonna go through and watch like, for example, you'll watch the one where Fives sacrifices himself before you watch Domino Squad,
Hmm.
because the Domino Squad arc comes afterwards. So you'll see the episode where Fives dies, and he makes sure that Echo or no, I'm sorry. You'll watch the episode where Heavy dies and allows Fives and Echo to survive. He sacrifices himself to save them. But you don't know who any of those characters are until like a season later when you watch the Domino Squad arc, which is when all of them are still on Camino in training.
Oh,
So
I
like if
see.
you watch that one first, then you know who Heavy is, and then when you watch him die, it's like, "Oh, now it hurts a little bit more because I know who this character is, but now I also know who Fives and Echo are, why they survived, and then we see them become super important parts to Star Wars. Fives almost discovering Order 66 before it happened, essentially. Well, actually, really, he did
He
discover
did,
it.
yeah.
He stopped it, and he's the reason that Rex was saved And then same with Echo. But then we see Echo. I mean, he's still going on all the way until Bad Batch is the last time we see him as of now.
Mm-hmm.
But like in Rebels and stuff, there's mentions of, but like they don't talk about him. But we can assume that he's running around somewhere, you know. And so it's like, I think that makes a lot more sense, and that helps if you watch it in the chronological order.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah.
I didn't know that. I didn't know that.
Yeah. No, it makes a huge difference. Don't watch it in the order that Disney Plus gives it to you. But yeah. Anyway.
Okay. So the Bad Batch ties in a lot to the Clone Wars.
Yeah.
I mean, you can talk about this one. I know that you mentioned it earlier earlier in the video how huge of an advocate
Yeah.
you are for clones and all this. So I'm sure you want to go on about this.
Okay, for me,
Hmm.
this goes to the top of A.
Okay.
And the reason why is because if it was just season 1 and 2,
Hmm.
I think I might put it in S tier. Season 3 dropped it
Wow.
down for me
Okay.
because the ending of the show and everything like that and how they progress the characters. But I will say, I think in general, these were the coolest characters that we got, definitely out of clones. But I think they had more personality than half the Jedi we saw in there, you know?
Oh yeah.
Like, I would watch a show about Wrecker more than I would watch a show about Plo Koon or Luminara Unduli or Barriss Offee or any of these other people. Because for me, Wrecker was so much more fun as a character.
Mm.
Hunter was such an amazing, like, a really well done character. Our own little Star Wars Rambo, essentially. And then, Crosshair had a super interesting story. We see, like, the cynical mind, but you know what? He's a sniper. That's very realistic to how a lot of them think. Tech, really cool being this brainy guy, and then obviously seeing Echo again as he comes back and becomes part of the Bad Batch in series 7 or season 7 of Clone Wars. Sorry. I just think as a whole, though, really really cool show. It doesn't quite make it to S tier for me, but it's really close. I think top of A
Okay.
for my rating.
So because I remember you said that Attack of the Clones is your favorite movie, so you would even have it above that.
Oh yeah, no, I think it's my favorite movie. Well, okay, here's another thing though. Attack of the Clones is my favorite movie.
Mhm.
Revenge of the Sith being my second favorite.
Hmm.
But I will say, I'm a big TV show guy. I'm not a big movie guy in general. Not
Okay.
just Star Wars.
Okay.
But just in general.
I see. I
I
see.
really like good TV shows. And so for me, like if you gave me the option, I would much rather, even now, I'll watch 3 hours of Clone Wars before I watch the full 2-hour movie of Attack of Clones. Because I'll just pick one of my favorite arcs and then I'll rewatch that. And then I'll go through, 6 or 7 episodes and it'll be the same time as the movie.
Yeah.
But for me, it's more entertaining. I like the characters more. I like the story, that kind of stuff. So I really like TV shows in general. And Bad Batch is one of those shows that I could easily sit down and rewatch it with no problem.
Okay.
Especially the first 2 seasons. Like, oh my God, they were fantastic. I love them. And
Okay.
so that's one of those things, like, I would even... for different parts of Clone Wars, I would watch Bad Batch over Clone Wars. For
Oh
certain
wow.
parts.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah, it just depends on the arc, though. It's like kind of a toss-up. But as a whole, I just don't think it's good enough for an S tier. But I would say it's better than even Rogue One. I'd say over
Wow.
everything in A tier. In my opinion, I think it has more.
Okay.
Because it also fills in a lot of the gaps. People don't think about, like, okay, for example, one gap that was huge, Kanan Jarrus.
Oh
He
yes.
is one of the main characters of Rebels. We find out a lot about Kanan's early life and how he leaves the Jedi, why his distrust of clones, everything like that. Because he's in episode 3 or something like that of the first season of Bad Batch when Order 66 happens. And we see Kanan's master get gunned down by clones. Order 66 happens. The Bad Batch is like, hey, what the hell's going on? Kanan is losing his mind because he just watched his master die, the clones who are his friends, everything like that. It's going on. I think that alone filled in so many gaps. And then you just, as it goes through, like we saw the Zillow Beast in season 3. And so all the seasons had like a lot of stuff that kind of filled in a lot of holes that we had from Clone Wars, as well as a couple things from like the prequel. Kind of, it led to that stuff. We saw a lot of those ideas. So I thought that was really interesting.
Okay. Very interesting aspects of the Bad Batch that I didn't really think about. So I'll tell you this, I'm not as high on this as you are, because you are
Fair.
a lot higher on this than me.
What are you thinking?
See, because like for me, and this is where it's tough because you're shuffling between S and A, and I'm shuffling between B and C, honestly, because I do feel like,
Really?
yeah,
Wow.
Bad Batch personally, I feel like there's just a lot of filler, and I'm just like, every time I watch it, I'm always thinking to myself, well, what's next? Because like it's cool to see this, and I think that's what the Bad Batch really is about. It's about to, showcase these characters, understanding that they don't really hold a super significant part of the timeline and stuff like that. And it's really just to showcase how good these guys really are with the abilities that they've been given. But
Yeah.
I mean, like, I was really annoyed with Omega for the longest time. It was only up until
Me
recently
too. I didn't like
where
her character.
I no, and that's the
That was one
thing
thing that
where,
kind of ruined it for me. Yeah.
yeah, and so it's just like I again, like, for me, Rogue One is, I think, is better, and I can't
That's fair.
I can't say that this is better than two of the
Yeah.
three original movies. Like, I can't. Now
Yeah, I know what you mean.
now
I'd be
again,
willing to put it above Phantom Menace in B.
okay.
I still think it's better than Phantom Menace.
Okay, that's fair. I think that's
Attack
fair.
of the Clones is difficult, obviously.
Yeah, see, so
But for
yeah.
me, it kind of goes back and forth.
And I think, okay, here. I don't mind putting it in A if you feel that strongly about it, right? Cuz you've made that very clear. It's just, for me, I think
Look at what's
personally,
left.
yeah, I mean, like, here's the thing. They had an opportunity to kind of help out the sequels, and that's what many of us thought that they were doing with this entire thing. And I still think that,
Yeah.
despite this being over, we are still left with so many question marks. And again, we talked about this in the car last night when we were together. Like, they didn't give these guys the heroic ending, the warrior's death, like we felt like they deserved, right? I mean, they literally got the happily ever after. And like, that's why, for me, like,
That's what I say. Yeah, season 3 was bullshit.
yeah, that's what I'm
I
saying. And
didn't
it's
like
just like, it just didn't do it a lot of
But 1 and
justice
2 were really good.
in terms of this like whole grading system that we're doing. So
Yeah.
I know you
So
love.
maybe B tier,
Okay.
but top of B.
I can do that. I can do that.
Top of B, I think, is fair. It's a really solid show. I mean, to anybody who hasn't seen it, highly recommend. It is definitely, it's a good show. You're right. There are a lot of fillers, though. Now that I'm thinking about it, it was slow. But I think for us too, it was harder to watch it. It's harder to watch fillers when you're watching it 1 week at a time.
Oh,
You know?
yeah,
'Cause
yeah,
it's one episode a
absolutely.
week.
Yeah.
And for us, when we were like, when season 1 came out, we were still senior year, and that was difficult. We were struggling with that
Yeah.
because trying to watch one every week was killing us. And then we would wait a whole week and then watch a filler episode, and we were like, "What the hell?"
Yeah.
So that's fair.
Yeah. I don't know.
You'll
I
get that.
like.
If you're binging it, it's not too bad. But I know what you mean.
Yeah. Yeah. And that, like, that's kind of where the struggle is at, because like, even my brother, and he's a huge Clone fan like you are too, so he loves this kind of
Yeah.
stuff. But it's like, again, like, for me, when I'm watching this kind of stuff, it's just like, why is this important? Like, why did we need this? And I
That's
just
fair.
left a lot of
That's
these
fair.
episodes where I'm like, we didn't really need that, you know? Now,
Yeah.
for them personally and, tracking their battles and their life story, yes, that is exactly what it's about. Because it just doesn't hold enough significance in the grand scheme of things in terms of what Star Wars is, that's why I'm just not as much, or I don't hold as much passion towards the show as you do.
Yeah.
But I totally understand it. Like, the clones are awesome. So, okay. Again, I think, like you mentioned, we will do some revising, some reshuffling when it's all said and
Yeah.
done. So,
Maybe
nothing is
here
set
and
in
there.
stone. Stay to the end of the video because we're going to be going over everything. Okay. Star Wars Rebels. Man, when we want to talk about underrated Star Wars movies and shows,
Yeah.
this is definitely one of them. Now, I'm not saying that this is an S tier. It's not for me. And I think if it was an S tier, I think that's a
this is
discredit to the
solid
Clone
B or an
Wars.
A.
I think so too. And again, this is another one that had a lot of filler episodes. And, again, like we mentioned, what show doesn't? But again, they did a great job of talking about a time period that isn't touched much upon. And you were able to incorporate Jedis in a way that you didn't really force anything, and you didn't make any of them too overpowered. I think Kanan Jarrus became really in tune with the Force, and that's a really special power in itself. We saw Ezra hold his own against Darth Vader very temporarily, and so it was never like, okay, these two guys are going to be strong Jedi. No, they are what you would expect from Jedi from these time period. They're decent, but they're never going to be those guys where it's like, oh yeah, like we're going to be talking about these guys as like legends amongst Jedi later on. So they did a great job of handling all of that. I thought Hera was a tremendous character, and just the rest of the group in general as well. And I think giving more, I mean, as if C3PO and R2D2 didn't have personality. I mean, Chopper, right? Just it
Yeah.
showed that like they could have
Huge personality. for sure.
personality and more emotion in a sense. Like, we always saw that the others did, but like this takes it to a whole nother level with Chopper. And then again, like everyone who's watching this is very in tune with Star Wars, and they understand, what the quality of a Jedi and a Sith looks like at this point. And I think that they just did it so well with the Grand Inquisitors. Sorry, not the Inquisitors, and the Grand Inquisitor as well. And how can you not mention Thrawn, who I think is one of the most badass bad guys out there in the Star Wars galaxy. So for me, I think that this is an A. Where do I put it? I would put it at the bottom of A. But I think Star Wars Rebels extremely underrated, and if you haven't seen it, you have to watch it. It's not a kid show. It's literally like the Clone Wars.
Yeah, I agree with that. I'd say, I mean, yeah, just honestly, you mentioned everything. I'm trying to think of like anything. It was cool to see Wolf and Gregor. too,
Yep.
Like Rex.
Yep.
Ahsoka plays a big role where she's Fulcrum and that kind of thing. Like that's really interesting. And then we also start to see in Rebels what was really interesting. Obviously Thrawn, right? We see the beginning of Thrawn and that whole idea. But also we see there are a couple different Imperial officers who defect. And so we see a lot of Imperials become rebels. And I think that's really interesting because with Rebels itself, you see that they didn't defeat the Empire, but they did free Lothal.
Yes.
Like, just one planet, which, it's a big win, but it's not, obviously, the entire Empire. But I think as a whole, really, really interesting. Actually, no, I'm sorry. Timeline-wise, so they didn't do it, but they did talk about it, how Hera and the rest of the rebels, they blow up the Death Star. They mention that at the end of the show. We just never see it.
Oh yeah, right.
But I think as a whole, yeah, it's really interesting to see that side of things. Like you said, it's on point with where the character should be. I think it was really cool to see a mix of like the Jedi plus like Zeb with his whole species and like their whole like the situation, migration, everything like that. You had obviously Chopper being a fan favorite. Sabine Wren was a really interesting character
Yeah.
being a Mandalorian.
Yes.
Seeing the use of Mandalorians, and then also what's interesting is, we saw Mandalorians who were loyal to the Empire, and then Mandalorians who were not. And we saw a split in Mandalore, and this was before the Siege of Mandalore. But really interesting to see, because then I feel like we see a lot of those similar tones in Ahsoka later on,
Yeah.
and Mando with like Bo-Katan and that kind of stuff.
Right.
Really, it was a cool period in Mandalorian history where it was a bit of both. Like some people were loyal, and then some people did not like the Empire, and they were like, "No, hey, I'm Mandalorian. Let me do my own thing." Really cool. So I would say Rebels is either under Attack of Clones in A tier,
Okay.
like either low A or it's top of B. Because I will say Rebels is better than Bad Batch. Far fewer filler episodes. I think a better storyline, cooler characters, like all that stuff. I'd say it's definitely a high B or a low A.
Okay. What are you leaning more towards?
I'm leaning more towards A tier.
Okay. And I can agree with that. We'll put that right there. I think another cool aspect that we didn't mention about Rebels is the world between worlds. I think that was super awesome, and I think that the fact that they continue
that was
to
the first time we saw that,
right, and they continue to elaborate it in Ahsoka as well, super fascinating, and great concept that was completely new to the Star Wars universe. Okay, Mandalorian. I'm wearing the shirt right now. Got a Mandalorian shirt on. More recently, and this is...
You go first on this.
Yeah, this is similar to the Bad Batch for you, where that last season just didn't... Yeah, it just didn't really put a good taste in our mouths. But I will say, one of the most memorable moments for me as a Star Wars fan, my God, I mean, when Luke Skywalker showed up at the end of Season 2, dude, when I'm telling you, and you guys can tell I'm a huge football fan. It felt like I was watching a football game because I literally jumped out of the couch and was screaming. Like the enjoyment and it's beyond that with The Mandalorian. I mean, that's just how you feel about the series in general, right? With the introduction of Grogu and just all of the countless missions that Mando was on and their whole business on Navarro, and it's just so much cool stuff going on. And again, you get to really explore those outer rim planets, which you get to see quite a few prior to when this was released, but then it just shows you just like how much there is to offer in this Star Wars universe and how badass the Mandalorians can really be, because this is a group of people who we're well aware of, but then we realize that they are outcasted because of what happened to them with the Siege of Mandalore that Armand just brought up. But again, such cool characters, and it just has that old Western feel to it, right? Without having to force any of those things. Again, they did tie that in when they go to Tatooine, and then, they have to take out that huge worm. So there's just so much cool stuff that you can bring up. But I mean, when Luke Skywalker came back, and again, that wasn't forced. Like, there was good reason for that with Grogu, and then them calling for a Jedi on that planet through the meditation that Grogu was trying to do. Like, again, I just love it when awesome things happen and they're not forced, but it just had a good mix of everything. I cannot tell, like, I'm smiling so much because that moment will live with me forever. I mean, COVID was a depressing time, and The Mandalorian made you forget about everything. So I'm forever grateful for the show.
That's very true. That's very true. I put this pretty high on my list too. I think Mando, I mean, like you mentioned, the whole thing about... So, first off, outside of clones, like, the second group that I love the most is Mandalorians. I love that kind of stuff. And we always talk about that.
Yeah.
Because I love the idea of this group of people strong enough to fight a Jedi with no force powers, and they didn't even have lightsabers outside of the original Vizsla with his dark saber. That's about it. Like, as Mandalorians in general, really, really interesting clan of people, and the way they fight, that warrior class mentality, really, really cool. And I love that they actually went into it and they show the truth behind that. I mean, even in the show, they have arguments. How do they solve them? They have duels.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And then the winner, okay, you won the duel, so we're gonna do it your way. And
Right.
like that whole mentality of it is really cool. And then with the Western side, where it's, you got Cad Bane and stuff thrown in there, plus the sheriff that Mando
Well,
became
the
friends with.
sheriff is in Mando. Cad Bane was a Boba Fett one.
Oh yeah, you're right.
Yeah.
You're right.
Yeah.
Which was just Mando season 2.5, which we'll talk about
Yeah.
when that comes up. But yeah, I'd say you're right. But just that Western theme with the big worm and all that kind of stuff, really, really interesting show. I'd say Mando for me is low A, top B, somewhere there.
Okay. I would say
I think it had a lot of good moments.
Yeah.
But I think there were a lot of filler episodes. And with a live action show, you can't be as forgiving. It's one thing to watch 20 minutes of Clone Wars and be a little disappointed because it's a filler. But if I'm going to sit down and I'm going to spend 45 minutes watching an episode and you don't give me any good content at all throughout the entire thing, I'm going to be kind of pissed. And that made me a bit, I don't like how many fillers, especially in the earlier seasons too. Which is why I would say top of B.
okay.
But
Yeah.
but I'd be open to an A class.
No, I'm with you on that, and I think this would be an A tier. Again, just like you said with the Bad Batch, this would be an A tier show without the last season that they put out. Like we could have
Yes.
gone without that. And again, like that was another one of those. I guess a hot word right now is edging. But they really edged us with the whole cloning thing again. Like with Moff Gideon, and just to find out that he was just trying to clone himself and make more of these robots and stuff like that. Like, I
That
wasn't a
is
huge
true,
fan of that.
yeah.
Like, I
That
like
made me mad.
again, it all ties back to the sequels, but we, do something with it, and it's just so underwhelming when they do all these things, So, I don't know. I
I
mean,
agree.
again, it was really cool to see the Mandalorians as a group in season 3, and the whole bringing back of kind of their culture and their ways and stuff, and then Grogu becoming a Mandalorian as well. But compared to what we had before, it just didn't match that same level of content that we were getting before. So I am fine with the top of B here. Very solid show, though. I mean, I don't have a ton of complaints about it. Boba Fett, this is one where, again, like you were better off making the 3 episodes that we got of Mando, the entire season 3, and I think people would have been happier with it. Now,
Yeah.
speaking of Boba Fett himself, I love the entire thing with the Sand People. I thought that was super cool.
Yeah.
It gave them a lot more attention as well.
Yeah. Seeing
what?
Tusken Raiders for the first time since episode
Oh,
3?
yeah.
Or no, 2.
2.
When was
Episode 2.
2, right?
Yes.
With the master. Yeah.
Yeah.
Really cool to see that.
Yeah, no, that was awesome. And like just seeing their way of life and everything. It just Boba Fett never really felt like a main character in this show, and that's the huge issue. And really for me, the best moments in this was when, Ahsoka and Luke were in the same frame together as they were training.
Yeah.
And, that was awesome. And the scenes with Mando and him going through like that meat shop and just like killing all of those guys, like that was awesome. The best moment with Boba Fett in it, I would say, was definitely the introduction of Cad Bane, which again didn't even have Boba Fett in it, but a lot of good moments. And the reason why this goes down for me is because Boba Fett is just not as involved in those memorable moments as he should be in his own show. I mean, I don't know
Yeah.
if I'm revealing some information that would have been helpful for them, but you don't even need a brain to know that, and that's the unfortunate part about this whole thing. So
So where would you rate it?
Again, Mando's carrying this thing. I would put it right above Solo.
Okay, that's solid. Okay, I'm right where you are, but I'm
Mhm.
thinking one more up over episode 7.
That's fine.
And that's because with Boba Fett, I thought was really cool is that one, we got to see Hutts, right? So talking about the Clone Wars movie, it's the same idea. We got to see Hutts. We saw the twins. That was really interesting. We see essentially Boba Fett take the palace too from Jabba, where it used to own it and everything like that. We see him do that. We see the introduction of Fennec Shand is in there. We see Cad Bane. We see Chrysanthemum, the Wookiee bounty hunter. He was a big deal.
Yep.
Bosk is in it for a little bit. Like he makes a small appearance. So we see a lot of really cool bounty hunters.
Hmm.
Some with more screen time than other, obviously. But seeing that was really, really interesting. I think it was cool to see. My favorite part of the series was Chrysanthemum.
Oh yeah,
Because
Chrysanthemum was cool. Yeah.
yeah, just seeing a Wookiee as a bad guy.
Yeah.
We haven't seen that yet.
Yeah.
That was the first time we saw it as
Right.
like someone who wasn't necessarily a good person. The only Wookiee anybody ever thought of was Chewbacca, obviously.
Yeah.
And then we see Captain, what's his name? Tarful?
Yeah.
Is that, yeah, on Kashyyyk. He was cool too, but he's still a good guy. He's friends with Yoda and all that stuff during Order 66. And then we see, what's the kid's name? The Wookiee Jedi?
Yes. Oh my goodness.
I forget his
I
name.
yeah. Yeah. But
we see now
yeah.
a Wookiee who's force sensitive. Now I think that's really cool that we've seen all these things. I think that's awesome. But seeing Chrysanthemum as a bad guy, when you think about the strength, okay, Wookiees are the gorillas of the Star Wars universe, except they're humanoid in the sense that they can communicate with other species as well,
Hmm.
and they stand on their legs. But if you think about a Wookiee, like there are scenes in the animated series where like Wookiees ripped stormtroopers' arms off.
Right. Right.
Like there's a whole sub series of this is part of Legends. There's a horror story that takes place on Kashyyyk where it's written from the Empire. I forget the artist who wrote it, but there's a whole book on it where it's literally a horror book from the perspective of the stormtroopers as they attack Kashyyyk. Because it's talking about, like, literally the Wookiees, like, ripping people in half and then, like, eating their bodies.
That's
Like,
ridiculous.
it's crazy when you think about it, because they're, like, a primitive species, but, they're still meat eaters and they do all that stuff.
Right.
Like, it's kind of crazy to think about that. And I think Chrysanthemum was the closest we've gotten in canon to seeing, like, that crazy strength. Just the brute strength behind a Wookiee. Like, let's be real. It's like that whole idea, would you be a Jedi or a Sith? A lot of people, if they got the power of the Sith, it would corrupt them.
Yeah.
The power of the Force, they would go to the dark side. It's the same thing with Wookiees. They're so
Sure,
powerful,
yeah.
they're so strong. I feel like there should be so many more evil Wookiees than there are good ones, only because they know they can just walk around and, like, destroy anybody who gets in their way. So Chrysanthemum was really cool.
Chrysanthemum's awesome. Yeah. No.
Yeah.
No,
You know what I mean?
that's a
Like,
great
it's
point.
It's a
Yeah.
small part of the series, but
Yeah.
I think it's still an important part.
Yeah.
And it was a cool, like, we had never seen it before,
Yeah. Well, we also never saw the Power Ranger speed bike gang.
Oh
So
my god.
yeah. But anyway.
Yeah,
Anyway.
that too.
Okay. So here's the thing, and I put some of them in the did not watch section. We talked about this prior, and I just didn't put it in, so that was my mistake.
Yeah.
Star Wars Resistance. I don't know how much you've watched of that. I've watched, I want to say roughly about half of the first season, but I wasn't super into it.
I was gonna say, I think I watched 2 episodes and I was like, oh, this is stupid.
No, like genuinely, like it is almost
It's
the
not
equivalent to reading a boring book. Like I will fall asleep if this gets put on. I am pushing it aside
Yeah.
because I haven't seen it yet, and I am gonna watch it eventually because it is canon, right?
Yeah, we can just put it in the did not
I
watch.
think that's fair.
Because for me too,
Yeah.
like I don't want to rate it a certain way, but I will say this was one of the few animated shows that felt like it was only for kids.
It really did. You are, yeah,
Like I was
absolutely.
struggling because I was like, no, I can't. I don't have the. It's one thing to watch Clone Wars because it's really not a kids show. Same with Rebels. Same with Bad Batch. Like none of those are, the amount of war crimes and stuff like that. It's still a dark show. Like you're not watching it because it's like, oh, it's animated, it's for kids. But Resistance felt like that. And then also, I wasn't a fan of, I mean, as it is, all the characters in it anyway, I don't really like them that much.
Yeah, they weren't super
And so I
interesting.
was like,
But again,
man,
like
I,
both of us watched it at an introductory phase of this, and so that's why I'm willing to give it a second chance because I know that they're going to touch upon characters in the sequels and maybe that'll change our opinions on some of those sequels. I mean, I
maybe.
doubt it. I doubt it. But again, I don't know too
I
many
really
people who
doubt
have
it
watched
too.
Resistance either. So it's tough to say and I think, that's for us to come up with our own opinion sometime down the road. Um
Yeah,
but yeah, I do think it's fair to leave it at that point for now. Again, like you
for
said,
now.
not fair to rate it when we haven't
We,
watched it from start to finish.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Because
Okay.
I can't make a decision off of like 2 episodes,
Yeah, yeah. But again, not a great first impression. We'll leave it at that.
Yeah.
Obi-Wan Kenobi. I'll let you start this one off.
Kenobi was a solid show.
Solid. Yep.
7 episodes. We got to see some really cool stuff. Prime Vader.
Yep.
We still get to see that Kenobi, he's still got it. He's a little rusty, but cool, cool storyline. I liked Baby Leia.
Oh
Kind of
yeah.
showed. I think that was a really interesting way for them to show the connection
Yes.
between her and Kenobi,
Yes.
why she was trying to contact him in episode 4.
Mm-hmm.
Why was, when she sent R2, hey, go find Kenobi, go to Tatooine, go find Kenobi. Like, that was really, really interesting. And so I think it was cool to see him as, Ben Kenobi, but still younger. It wasn't that type of Alec Guinness age yet.
Yeah.
But I think Ewan McGregor did a really, really good job in general doing that. I think it was cool to see the different characters and stuff. It was a very short show. I do kind of wish it was a bit longer. But, seeing the Inquisitor and Rhea and all that stuff was... Like, yeah, they were cool characters. I think it was okay, Kenobi wasn't, like, the best.
Mm-hmm.
But
I agree.
at the same time, for what it was, I think people were like, okay, look, we've got 7 episodes, and all this is, really, is just to showcase what Kenobi did between, between the Clone War, like, between Order 66 and episode 4.
Yeah.
This is just to show that gap of, like, 20 years when Luke was still growing up. And I think it did a really good job of that because, I mean, how much trouble did he really get into on Tatooine?
Right. Right.
It's not like we saw a lot of it. I think it was just one of those things like, okay, well, they made a cool story out of it. We got to hear Qui-Gon's voice again. That was really interesting. And then we see that, like, he's going to train with Qui-Gon in the end, once he can see. But I think the ideas of, he had blocked out the Force originally, and then after Kenobi, towards the end of it, Obi-Wan decided, no, I'm going to get back into it. I'm going to start practicing again. And then once he unlocks the Force again, essentially, like in his mind, he took the block away. And then that's when we hear Qui-Gon, and we realize, like, okay, he's ready to go.
Yeah.
And I think it set up, it was a really nice connection. I put this at I'd say a B tier.
Okay.
Because it was really interesting. It was a good show, but it wasn't anything like super special. I will say, I think I put this below Bad Batch, but above No, actually, no. Bottom of B, because I can't put it above Phantom Menace.
Okay, I'm with you on that.
I'm just thinking Duel of the Fates and the fight with Darth Maul and Qui-Gon and like all that stuff is just it's too iconic. The Kenobi didn't do that good. Like it wasn't good enough to put up there.
Yeah, no, I mean that entire fight scene with him against Vader, like that was awesome. Now,
Yeah.
again, the whole thing, was it necessary? Did they need to fight again? I don't know, right? But it was cool
Yeah.
nonetheless, and I mean, the opening up of the helmet, and that was fantastic.
That was interesting.
Right,
Yeah.
like that whole thing, it was just like, oh my god, like we're back here again, and like there was a real opportunity. It's crazy to think about it because it's like Obi-Wan had a real opportunity to really put a near end to the Empire if he just had the will, in him to kill Darth Vader in that moment because he really could have. But
That's true.
I
That's
mean
very
that
true.
was, yeah, that was huge. But I mean, again, like people people have been so critical recently about Star Wars, and they're all like, "Oh, the whole thing with Leia was, stupid and everything," and it's like, again, it's one of those things where we didn't really have the answer to. No one was really looking for it, but it makes a ton of sense. Like, how does
Yeah.
Leia know Obi-Wan when Obi-Wan was supposedly hiding on Tatooine the entire time? There's no reason why she would know him, and there's no connection between Tatooine and Alderaan. So it's just like
Hmm.
this. It almost was necessary in a sense, and so I'm with you on this. I think that that is a great place for Obi-Wan to be amongst our tier
Yeah.
list.
And I
Okay.
think when it
Yep.
comes down to it too, like I'm glad they did it because the only other explanation is that like Bail Organa was like, "Hey, I had a friend Obi-Wan or like I had a friend Kenobi. If you ever need anything, like go find this guy."
Yeah.
But even then, Organa didn't know where Kenobi was either. It's not like they kept in touch, right? Kenobi went down to, he was down to dirt, gone, radio
Right.
silent. Nobody knew, like all that stuff, So
Right.
I'm glad that they did what they did because I think it made it a lot better.
Yeah, and for anyone who might have just heard what Armand said and said, well, they discussed that the boy Luke Skywalker would be taken to Tatooine. You still don't know where he's hiding, and it's not like Obi-Wan's going to be hiding in a spot where he's going to be easily found, and he
Yeah,
wouldn't give that location away anyway. You can know he's on Tatooine. Everywhere in Tatooine looks the goddamn same, so it's going to be pretty hard to find him,
yeah, for real.
So
Like you want the rock with sand or the sand with rock? Like, pick one. It's like where are you gonna find him? No, I agree.
Okay, yeah. That's Obi-Wan for us. Andor.
Yeah.
Now, I won't say too much because Armand has not seen Andor yet, and so I mean, this is gonna have to
Yes.
just be a single rating on
I've
its
been
own.
slacking on that.
Andor, I will say, okay, this is one of the best shows that Star Wars has put out. Very slow start, but it was necessary because even though we knew Cassian from Rogue One, we didn't know him personally. We never got that from Rogue
Mhm.
One. And so his entire backstory was slow yet necessary. But what I think this show did a great job of that none of the other Star Wars movies or shows do is show the brutality of the Empire. Because we hear about it all the time and we see it in full effect in Andor. And I think that that's the greatest thing because, why do a lot of people complain about the Empire? Well, we know the reasons why. Now we get to see it, and we just understand how much of a chokehold the Empire did have on so many systems and so many individuals across the galaxy. And I think that that was a great thing about it. And again, it also shows that perspective of the rebellion, how hard and how fine-tuned everything needs to be assembled in order for this to work out because really it is a long shot. There is no reason why this should work. But it takes people like Cassian to take it to the next level and allow them to become successful in the ultimate goal of overthrowing the Empire. So that's what I love about this whole thing and the entire thing that happens on Narkina 5. is just tremendous. And again, we brought up Andy Serkis because not only was he Snoke, but he was also one of the main characters in Andor as well. He just did a super great job in this show as well. I'm glad that they were able to tie him into what I would consider to be a much more significant role in this show. I cannot say enough good things about Andor, and the reason why I am, being as much of an advocate for this show as I am is because, I mean, Armand is not watching it for different reasons, but other people are just not giving it a chance because they just don't feel like it's Star Warsy enough. But when it comes down to it, like Star Wars is about war and the brutality of, civilizations and people and politics and stuff.
Yeah, true.
Andor summarizes that so well, and they couldn't have chose a better character to really spotlight in this whole thing because he really embodies what the rebellion is standing for. So I love Andor. I Oh man, I mean this is tough. I mean there are some moments in here that I'm putting up there with Mando. It's tough because I love Mando. I'm gonna put Andor right below Mando, and this one honestly for me could have easily been in the A tier as well. Like again, I'm speaking very highly of it, and again that's not because I mean my rating says it. It's not the greatest thing ever, but I think it is
pretty good, yeah.
Something that's added to Star Wars, right? And it makes a difference. It makes a difference. It gives you a different perspective. It makes you think a different way, and it makes you understand a lot of the things that have been spoken about in the Star Wars world. So I will leave it at a B right there. Okay, I did a lot of talking for obvious reason. Armand, let's touch upon Tales of the Jedi now. We have 3 more left.
Yeah. I mean, okay, so Tales of the Jedi, really interesting show in general. I think it was one of those things that, it answered a lot of questions that we didn't know we had. I think that's a good way to put it. Because it was nothing in Tales of the Jedi was like, oh, we need the answer for this. But then when we saw it on the TV, it was like, oh, that explains, like, we see how Dooku falls to the dark side.
Mm-hmm.
They go over the death of Qui-Gon.
Right.
And how that really hits Dooku very hard.
Yeah.
And one of the main reasons that Count Dooku actually turns is because for him, he sees Qui-Gon's death as it was useless. It shouldn't have happened. But because the Jedi were so corrupt and blinded, that's why Qui-Gon died.
Mm-hmm. So
Dooku really, he blamed Qui-Gon's death and the death of his own apprentice on the Jedi Council and on Yoda specifically. So I think that was really interesting because it makes a lot of sense, and it kind of reminded me of why Anakin turned. It reminded me of Anakin and how the reason Anakin turns is because he's trying to save Padme. Dooku turned because he couldn't save Qui-Gon. And it's a really interesting idea behind that. I noticed that as a really cool parallel between the two characters. But then on top of that, in that same movie, we also see Yaddle.
Yep.
Really interesting. We see Mace Windu earlier on, where he's not a Jedi Master yet. He's a Master, but he doesn't have a seat on the Council. And so we see that. That was really cool. And then, outside of the Jedi side of things, we also see a young Ahsoka. And we see how powerful she is, even as a child, which really, I think a lot of fans had forgotten the strength that Force-sensitive children had, too. And they mentioned it a little bit in the Clone Wars, and we see it every now and then. But, kids with Force powers are very, very strong, and there's a lot of things they can do that come from that. And it was nice to see the reminder with Ahsoka, But, all in all, long story short, honestly, Tales of the Jedi was really interesting for me. I would put it at above Kenobi, but still below Phantom Menace.
I'm with you on that. I am with you on that. Yeah, I like that. And I think you pretty much covered the whole thing. I think that was a great summary of it all. I think and we talked about how naive the Jedi were, just handling this entire situation. I love how simple the deleting of Camino was in this show. Like, bro really just walked straight into the back room and was like, "Yep, this thing is gone." Like, it was that
Yeah.
simple, you know? And it 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 was just, again, so simple but so well done, cuz it told
Mhm.
you everything you needed to know about how the Jedi were operating. And I think that was fantastic. But aside from that,
Yeah, the
you
fact
said
that
everything well.
anybody had access to that is crazy, you know?
Yeah.
Just being a part of it, but there were no checks.
Yeah.
Nobody thought to put in a sensor and be like, hey, if someone's deleting information, maybe have a librarian come and vet the information.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know? A very basic step in security that would have prevented the entire fall of the Jedi.
Yeah. I
When
agree.
you think about it, that butterfly effect. But
Yeah.
yeah, no, it's really, really interesting. And nobody noticed, like, nobody thought about it. Nobody could sense his dark feelings or anything like that. Like, nobody was paying attention, you know? And so, definitely really interesting.
All right, moving on to Ahsoka now. I'll let you
Yes.
kick this one off as well, since only I saw Tales of the Empire. So
Yeah. I mean, okay. Ahsoka, I got mixed feelings about it. I I like I like the show. I think it's cool that they're tying in Thrawn and Morgan Elsbeth. I think it was awesome that we saw Ezra. I like Sabine's character. I'm not a huge fan, one, of Sabine having the Force. I think that was a weird
yeah,
thing to tie in. I think she should have been like a General Grievous type of character, where they train her in how to use a lightsaber because
she's a
the
warrior.
dark saber. Yeah, train her as a warrior, but then, why are you focusing on the Force? You don't have to have the Force to wield a lightsaber, which Mandalorian showed us time and time again. But it was also like, I don't know, Ahsoka doesn't seem like a good mentor for her. And so just I wasn't a huge fan of that. Um I really liked the two Sith that were fighting. Thought that was really interesting. I forget the guy's name now. Balin Scroll, I think.
Oh, Balin Skull.
Um,
Yes.
Balin Scroll, that's what. He had a really interesting character, and I
Yeah,
liked him.
absolutely.
He was my favorite character in the whole show. And the reason why is because he's not a Sith.
No,
Like when you
he's
think
not.
about it, he's in his quest for power, but he has honor. So it's interesting. He's the closest thing that I can think of in canon to a gray Jedi.
Yeah, absolutely.
And and for those of you who don't know, a gray Jedi essentially is someone who uses both sides of the Force. They use their mentality. The gray Jedi were focused on a balance between good and bad. So not just the light side of the Force, but not just the bad side either. So gray Jedi could use Force lightning, but they could also Force heal. And so it was like you have both sides, the good and the bad. It's a balanced person. And he seems to be like a little bit of that, where it's like, okay, he's the bad guy, yeah. But he still had honor, and he was like, no, we show respect, we do all these things. Like, he had a strong character, which I thought was a really interesting way of showing a Sith. But, really interesting character. I wasn't a huge fan of how they ended off the last season. Do you know if they're making another season?
Yes, I believe they are, and if they are not, we will see more content at the least, because they're gonna tie in all
In
of
the
those
movie
shows in
thing.
the movie. Yeah.
Yeah, okay. That's what I thought. I don't know. I mean, for me, I'd say Ahsoka is still better than. I'd put it at mid B over Tales of the Jedi
Okay.
and Kenobi.
Okay.
I still don't think it passed that Phantom Menace mark, but still a solid show. Like it's not a bad show, you know.
Okay. No, I'm with you on that.
Yeah.
I mean, yeah, I love Balin Skull as well. Who
Mhm.
knows if he's really looking for, I mean, maybe he's unaware that they're not dead, but they're not definitely not present in the mortal world anymore. I'm talking about the father, the son, the daughter.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, that cliffhanger is super interesting. It's so unfortunate that he passed away because I think there's a lot in store for his
Yeah.
character, and I mean, just him as a person in general too, disregarding Star Wars. Um, but then I think Ahsoka, yeah, I mean, it's just very interesting. I just don't know if this was necessary. We'll see how necessary it is once this entire timeline in itself plays out. But I just feel like, we've already seen so much of Ahsoka throughout the Clone Wars and throughout Rebels, where like this just didn't feel necessary because we know Ahsoka, and it's not to say what she does after is irrelevant, but she made her mark on the galaxy, and that was
Mhm.
evident to
Mhm.
anyone who watched all of the content prior to this. So I like where this stands. Wasn't a great show. It was a good show. Um, and it wasn't
Yeah.
bad at all. I mean, I thoroughly enjoyed Ahsoka. It was pretty good.
Yeah.
Okay,
I
and
do
then
agree with the fact that it is unnecessary, though. You're right.
yeah, that's the only issue. Like you could have focused on someone else, or just don't do anything at all. But again, it's
I think
Disney.
what they should have done was made the show about Sabine Wren.
You could have done that,
If they
honestly.
focused on Wren, then they still could have shown
Ahsoka,
Ezra
yeah.
coming out, and
Oh
then
yeah,
Ahsoka could have been in it. Like they could literally do this whole show exactly the way it is. But I don't think it should be about Ahsoka because the whole idea of it is that this is so we saw Ahsoka a lot, obviously in Clone Wars. She was one of the main characters, if not the main,
hmm
for a really long time. And then we also see her in Rebels, where she is constantly in and out of the last, I think, the two seasons, 3 and 4. She's in it pretty much the whole time. So we know that she's involved in stuff. And then where does Ahsoka pick up? It picks up off of the last episode of Rebels. And I just feel like if they had focused on Sabine Wren as the main character, they could have done the show the same way, had Ahsoka come in, but I just don't think. I don't know. It just seems unnecessary. But I know what you mean.
yeah, and I'm totally with you, and especially knowing now that Sabine is potentially a Jedi, like it would have made more sense. So I'm with you on that boat as well. You could have
Yeah.
done a Sabine Wren show as well, and like they touched upon it a lot in Rebels as well. Her ability to fight was very well documented throughout that time. So
Hmm.
it's not like this would be like a out of nowhere and why are we doing this? Like there was definitely some potential there, and we found that out in this
Yeah.
show. It could have been focused on a little bit more, but again, that's a topic for another time. Tales of
I
the
agree.
Empire. Again, this is one similar to Andor. I'm not going to give away too much of the main plots, but I will say, um, love the way that they kind of tied Morgan Elsbeth into her role. I wasn't sure how they were gonna do it. Still a very mysterious character. Now, not so much. You kind of understand where she comes from, what her reasons are,
Mm.
and it just makes a ton of sense. And this wasn't someone that I would have ever imagined that they would have really highlighted, but super cool nonetheless. And with Barris Offee, she gets detained, and that's as much as we see from her. But to see where she ends up, what she goes through, and then what that has in store for her, I think that was all really well done as well. I mean, again, like I'm not going to give away too many spoilers for those of you who haven't seen it, since it is the most recent show that has come out on Disney Plus, but definitely would consider watching it. I mean, it pretty much holds the same vibe as the Tales of the Jedi, and so if you enjoyed that, I don't see why you wouldn't enjoy this. Yes, the
Yeah.
characters are lesser known, but again, that's why they have this show, right? It's to educate us
Yeah.
on, who really are these people, and what does their story hold. So, for me, I mean, again, like it's super close. I'm gonna put this below Kenobi because I do think Kenobi was better than this, and I don't think it was as good as Tales of the Jedi. But again, when Tales of the Jedi has characters like Count Dooku and Ahsoka, I mean, how are you gonna top that? So this is what our final list looks like, unless we have anything that we want to change. It has been a very lengthy episode, but
Yes.
I mean, we're talking about the entire timeline of Star Wars here, so how can it not be?
Yeah. No, I mean, when it comes down to it, I'm feeling pretty good about this episode or this list. I do wish the Phantom Menace was higher, but I can't justify it going above Bad Batch or even Andor. And so I think everything's in a good spot. I mean, when it comes down to it though, like when you look at this list, you know, you can't expect too many S tiers.
Yeah.
And then on top of that, the C's and D's are pretty much exactly what I thought they were going to be before we even started making this. I was fully expecting for all the sequels to be C and D at the highest, and then Boba Fett too. And so, you know, I'm feeling good about this. I think it's about right. Like it doesn't seem wrong at all.
Yeah, no, I love this too as well. I don't really have too many complaints.
I think this came together really well, and honestly, we didn't have to compromise on too many.
Yeah, not really.
Where it was like a tier off.
Yeah,
we were all pretty much in the same area. I mean, you guys let us know what you think in the comments. If you disagree with a certain pick, you know, throw it in there and say why you think it should be higher or lower. What tier do you put it in? You know, why do you like that show or episode or whatever more? But I think this is solid. And then as for the did not watch stuff, those are all the kids shows really. So Braden and I haven't really watched any of the kid related stuff. And then obviously I still have to get through Andor and Tales of the Empire, but that was purely because, you know, school is a lot. And so now that I'm on break, and now that we're back home for the summer, that's going to be part of my thing where I'm going to watch all that stuff. But, yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, that's all I got.
That'll be good when you knock that out, because then I think, like, I mean,
Yeah.
we could easily just make videos on that as well, talk about, you know,
No, for sure.
those shows and stuff like that, because, I mean, we've never obviously been able to really elaborate on that in conversation.
Yes.
But most importantly, guys, if you enjoyed this video, hit the like button. Like Armand said, comment your thoughts on these shows. What you agree, what you disagree with, and most importantly, don't forget to subscribe. This is what you can expect from a new Star Wars channel. Thank you guys for watching, and until then, we will see you guys all later. Peace.
Peace.